Here's 10 things you should know if you're learning guitar. Number 1, did you know that there's a sweet spot on the frets? Frets on the guitar are actually these metal bars that are inlaid into the fingerboard. But visually, a lot of people just think of the box as where they're supposed to put their fingers down. But you might not have known that there's actually a sweet spot, a perfect place for you to place your finger to make the clearest, cleanest, and easiest note. And if you think about the physics of the guitar for 1 second, it'll make a lot of sense. The way the guitar changes pitch is by shortening the length of the string, which you do manually by clamping it down and pressing it to the metal to create a new endpoint, which means that the sweet spot, the best place to put your finger, is actually right to the left of the fret. If you put it right on top of the actual metal, it's going to muffle and mute the sound, but just a little bit to the left is the sweet spot for the clearest note. Number 2, if you want to go faster, you're actually going to have to start slower. This is commonly passed around in guitar circles, but if you're a beginner at the guitar, you might think that going faster on the guitar just means putting maximum effort into it and trying to go as fast as possible. But really, speed on the guitar is just a sign of muscle memory and comfortability, which means that it's a lot better for you to actually start a song really slow, but with the right rhythm, so that your fingers get used to the feeling of the song, even though it might not sound quite as fast as you'd like. And then you can slowly start to build up the speed so that you can get to where you want. A good rule of thumb is if you don't have to think about what your fingers are doing, you're ready to start boosting the speed. Number 3, except in really specific situations, you should learn how to use both with a pick and without. It's super normal for first-time players to pick up a guitar pick, not like the way that it feels, and then immediately put it down and never practice with one. But there's actually a point to using a pick. It can create sounds and techniques that you aren't able to perform with your fingers, and the same vice versa. So if you want to be a well-rounded player, or if you have songs that you like in different styles, you're probably going to want to use both a pick and fingerstyle, which means why wait on either? Work on both of them equally, and that way you'll be ready and prepared when you find a song that needs one or the other. Number 4, you'll instantly sound a lot better if you focus on getting the rhythm correct, even if the fingers are a little bit off. Here's what I mean. It's really typical to maybe play a chord progression, let's say like C to D to G, and to struggle with making those transitions at first. So what people will tend to do is pause and create a giant brick of silence in between the chords until their fingers are perfect, completely neglecting the rhythm, which could look something like this. And obviously that sounds like you're a beginner at the guitar. But the secret that not a lot of people know is that if you can practice using your rhythm and keeping your hand on this side going no matter what, you'll actually sound a lot better even if you mess up really hard on this side. Let me show you an example with the same set of chords. Let's say that you're playing, but instead of worrying about this hand, you keep your rhythm going. You might see something like this. Completely messed up the D chord, and it took me a while to get the G chord down, but it instantly sounded better because I didn't stop the flow of the song. And at the same time, you're also training this hand to catch up with this hand rather than the other way around, which is much more important. You even learn down the road that there's some cheats guitar players do by playing the open strings as part of their strum so they have time to move to the next chord. So at the end of the day, while both hands are important, it's the rhythm that you don't want to stop. Number 5, it's okay to change your technique depending on what you're doing. I think a problem that a lot of guitar teachers get into is not being flexible with either the style that the student is playing or with where on their fretboard they're playing. You might hear this rule, for example, that you'd like to keep your thumb on the middle of the back of the neck, which is relatively true. It keeps your fingers flexible, it keeps your palm from touching the guitar, which can cause problems, and it allows you to fully extend your wrist, which allows you to stretch further and further down the fretboard. But it turns out that this is actually really difficult to maintain when you're playing open chords unless you're in the classical position. And since most people play in a more modern position, what I like to recommend is when you're playing open chords, you're allowed to put your thumb over the top of the guitar, even if it can only reach a little bit. Technique-wise, this might look wrong, but it's actually a lot easier to make this D chord with my thumb over the top. It curls my fingers for me and lets the space underneath, whereas when my wrist is extended like this, I have to work really hard to get the same sound. So that's why you'll notice a lot of players down here playing with their thumb around the top, but then when they transition to bar chords, you'll notice the thumb goes back to the middle of the neck. Which leads me to number 6. When you're playing notes, you almost always want to keep your fingers perpendicular to the fretboard. That means straight up and down. But again, you can be flexible depending on the style. What you'll find is that most people tend to have their fingers curved like this on the fretboard, which really makes it hard for your pinky to do any work or to reach down the fretboard. So if you're ever having trouble, you might want to try to straighten your fingers out on the fretboard. This is going to bring your thumb down just a little bit on the neck, your wrist just a little bit out, and it will allow you to reach these very crazy distances and fully utilize your pinky, which you might need. A good example might be playing this major scale. You'll notice how my hands are positioned, and then I'll play all the way through it. I'm I'm allowed to make big shifts like this with no problem. But a good counterexample might be in the blues, where you utilize a lot more bends, and you'll notice that this bent style here allows my wrist to come and push up on the bend. Because I'm mainly using the pentatonic scale, I don't actually need my pinky at all. So there are scenarios where you can have these curved fingers and play really nicely. Number 7, positioning is everything. A little bit of technique goes a long way. Making sure that you don't tilt your guitar at all, even if you're trying to look at the frets, because that makes it difficult for your hands. Making sure that you're not resting your arm on your leg or anything like it. The only point of contact should be on your right arm and your left thumb. Making sure that your arm isn't coming around and hugging the body of the guitar, bringing all of this weight up with it. Forcing your elbow to be the one that makes strums. Instead, resting your guitar on top so that you can hang right over the sound hole where your hand is supposed to be. You can relax, and you can use your wrist to do strumming. Making sure that your pick is between your thumb and your first finger and not on the underside or the squishy part of your fingers, because it'll slip and slide out. Instead, you want to place your pick right on top of your first finger's nail, clamped between your thumb, and allowing your thumb joint to go in and out to flex with the pick if needed. And for fingerstyle, adopting the thumbs up approach, where you give yourself a thumbs up and then place it sideways on the guitar for fingerstyle and finger picking, which places the thumb in front of the other fingers and allows these back fingers to pull up, which is what they naturally want to do when they hit those notes. Number 8, the reason why I sound better than you when I'm playing the exact same thing on the guitar is because of the way that I express my notes. We could be playing an identical set of notes, but I might sound better than you because I know how I want those notes to sound. I might be putting in the extra work to make those notes sustain. That means playing the note for as long as possible until you move on to the next one, instead of just letting the pressure off and creating this choppy staccato sound. I might be utilizing vibrato, where you take one of the notes and wiggle it a little bit for effect. Or I might be connecting notes with slides, hammer-ons, pull-offs, and more, allowing me to express those notes in a much better way. Number 9, when it comes time to change guitar strings, and you should change your guitar strings probably at least twice a year, you can do it yourself. Changing strings on the guitar is actually really easy, and it's an essential skill if you're a guitar player that it seems like a lot of people learning on YouTube have lost. Very simple. It takes one tool that you can buy at any guitar shop, where you just pop out these end pins, unwind or cut the strings, put the new ones in, wind it up and tune it. You might also be interested to know that there are a few different kinds of guitar strings, and the first thing you're going to look for is the thickness, or what we call the string gauge. Most standard acoustic guitars start with a 12 gauge string. That means that the thinnest here is a 12 gauge thickness. Right now on my guitar, I use 13s, which are thicker strings that resonate more but put more tension on the guitar and are harder to bend and hold down. Whereas going with a lighter gauge obviously negates that. And the second thing you want to pay attention to is what types of metals they're using in the strings. There's really only two big kinds. What we call 80-20 bronze or phosphor bronze strings. You can visually tell because 80-20 strings are visually a lot more yellow than phosphor bronze strings, which are like these, a little bit more brown and golden. And basically the big difference between the two is that 80-20 bronze strings are a lot brighter. So if you have a guitar that you might want thinner, brighter strings on, you can use an 80-20 set and maybe even a thinner gauge. For a guitar like mine, for example, I like having a nice warm sound to complement this brighter guitar. So I use 13 gauge phosphor bronze strings, and of course you'll want to make sure to get your guitar set up so that you don't have any tension problems, which again you can do at any guitar shop if you're changing the thickness of the strings. And finally, number 10, start with the fun stuff first. Remember, this whole thing is supposed to be fun. There's no right way to start the guitar. You literally just need to play and develop your finger muscles. So you might as well start with learning a song or a riff that you think is really cool, rather than going through a whole textbook that you're kind of bored at because you think it's the right thing to do when you start guitar. I can tell you from experience that it's going to be difficult no matter what you do and no matter what teacher you have, because literally you just need to start developing your finger muscles. So the more you play the guitar, the better it is for you and the better player you're going to be. There's no shortcuts or ways around building calluses, so you might as well start now and start with something fun. And if you finally get down a song that you love, you'll be a lot more encouraged to continue to pick up the guitar. Let me know what you guys think of all of these tips in the comment sections below. I've been playing guitar for a long time, and I actually write original music, with my last album, October, coming out in June. If you want to check that out, see what I'm about, or even support me for free on Patreon, you can head to the links in my profile. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.